Hi, good afternoon to everyone, or good morning wherever you are. My name is Thomson Fontaine, Dr. Thomson Fontaine, and I have decided to make this recording following an article I wrote in the Dominican.net entitled Alarm Over the Shrinking Number of Banks in Dominica. This is a topic I believe that should concern every single Dominican, not only at home, but those in the diaspora, because it speaks to the very heart of the country's development. It speaks to a lot of different issues with regards to development. Now, the reason why I decided to make this video is because since this article came out yesterday, I've received scores and scores of comments from different individuals. Some has accused me of being sensational. Others have accused me of trashing the country, and all of those different sinister motives that has been assigned to me. But I think it's important before I continue that I outline where I'm coming from, because some people may not know of my background. I'm a former IMF economist, worked over 13 years at the IMF, where I looked at just those types of issues. But more importantly, in 2006, I wrote a very definitive academic paper, which was published by the IMF on this very topic of financial stability. Since 2006, this particular paper, and you can look it up, you can Google it, is called Currency, just put Currency Crisis, Thomson Fontaine. Since 2006, this particular paper has been quoted over 5,500 times. It has been referenced by over 5,500 times by different university professors and others doing research in economics on these very critical areas, from Latin America to Israel to the United States to Asia. In addition, that particular work has been translated into Korean, into Chinese, into French, and into Spanish. So it has a wide reach. So I know what I'm talking about when I put some emphasis on the financial banking system in Dominica. And I'm not being sensational. I think it's important that the people of Dominica understand what is going on. Now, what are the facts? The fact is that come January of 2023, we will have one international bank in Dominica, which will be the Republic Bank, headquartered in Trinidad, and one national bank, the National Bank of Dominica. So two banks. Previously, we had four international banks. We've seen the departure of Banque Française Commerciale. We've seen the departure of the Royal Bank of Canada. We've seen the departure of Scotia Bank. And the most recent one will be First Caribbean Bank, which was formerly the Barclays Bank. Now, why is that important? This is very important for many, many reasons, because the bank that remains, the two banks that remain, there are certain issues that you must be aware of. To begin with, the National Bank of Dominica, which is the bank of deposits, and it's going to get a lot more depositors because, quite frankly, the First Caribbean Bank is shutting down completely. So what this means effectively is that persons who have their deposits, like myself, who have a savings account or a checking account with First Caribbean Bank, now have to look for another bank in Dominica. And where do you go? You can either go to Scotiabank, sorry, not Scotiabank, to the Republic Bank, or you can go to the National Bank of Dominica. My concern with the National Bank of Dominica is that this bank is being used as the personal piggy bank of the government of Dominica. Now, why do I say that? Parliament put a limit on the amount that the government could take as an overdraft in the banks of Dominica. That limit is $56 million. In 2020, the government took an overdraft of over $125 million. Then because it is a majority owner in the bank, it decided that it would convert this really short-term liability and overdraft, because you have to pay an overdraft in a much quicker time, into a long-term loan. So that's $125 million that the National Bank of Dominica does not have to on-lend to individuals, and it does not have to on-lend to the shrinking, I must add, to the shrinking private sector. Then in 2021, the government again took an overdraft of over $133 million. So 133 plus 125, you're talking about over $250 million that is now no longer available to ordinary people. My other concern about the actions of the government of Dominica is that by failing to grow the economy, by failing to provide jobs, by failing to provide incomes, I mean the average income of the government worker has gone down, has been cut by almost half because of inflation. There has been very few wage increases. I made a comparison. I was a teacher in Dominica in 1993, and my salary at the time, when I compared it to a salary that a teacher is receiving today, just a difference of a couple $100 over more than 30 years. So that's what we are talking about. That's the concern that we have. The fact that the economy is not growing is, and in fact, is one of the major reasons why we have the situation of the banks living. Because the way the banks operate, the way the banks make their money is by taking deposits from depositors and then on lending to customers. But to on lend to customers, they have to have the capability or the ability to repay you. But if a public servant, and then my government is the largest employer in Dominica, the private sector has shrunk remarkably. So the private sector, in terms of the number of persons who are employed in the private sector, we have cataloged over 4,000 businesses over the past 20 years that has left Dominica. These are thousands and thousands of jobs that have been lost as a result. So the private sector is shrunk. Those who are working for government have not seen any salary increases. So in truth and in fact, people in Dominica have very low real incomes. So it's very difficult to go face a bank. When, for example, a high school teacher making $2,500, it's very difficult for that teacher, after paying rent, meeting their monthly expenses, to have enough to pay a mortgage or enough to pay a personal loan. So what has happened? These banks are finding it increasingly difficult to operate because of the fact that they're no longer profitable. And that's why they're leaving. So in one of the comments that I received, an individual says, but you're being unfair because the banks are not only living in Dominica. Scotiabank left all of the Caribbean. I said, that is true. But the impact of Scotiabank living in Antigua or living in St. Kitts or living in Barbados is not the same as the impact of Scotiabank living in Dominica. In other words, in these other countries, you do not have the same reckless behavior of government. You do not have your two banks only standing in those countries. You still have other banks. So people have choices. And I'm not even going to go into the very obvious situation where your choices are limited and that those banks can dictate what level of interest rate that they charge you. So you're not going to see a reduction in interest rates. If anything, it's going to become more difficult for the average person in Dominica to access loans. It becomes more difficult for the average business in Dominica to access loans. So what you see happening, and what will continue to happen, is that those banks will continue to make money through the charging of fees. So for example, a very simple example, in the US, you send a wire transfer. You are charged on the wire transfer in the US. When it lands in your bank in Dominica, in the National Bank of Dominica, you again charged. You're double charged. Any money is landed into your account at the National Bank of Dominica is charged. All right? So you're paying twice. You're paying twice for a transfer. So transfer costs you 25 US dollars from your bank in the US. It gets to the National Bank of Dominica. They take off, which is not supposed to happen. But that is how the banks can make their money. So when you transfer monies to another person coming from another bank in Dominica, even locally, fees are charged. So if I transfer money, for example, from the First National Bank or from Scotia Bank into National Bank of Dominica, a fee is taken out of this money. So that is how these banks are going to have to make their money, because they are now no longer able to lend as normal banks would. But my more fundamental concern, and that is why I regret that the readers of this particular article are restricting it to a matter of politics. It is not political. I consider myself to be a professional, and I want people to judge me by my professionalism. I will not jeopardize my professionalism as an economist, as a world-renowned economist. I will not jeopardize my reputation for simple politics. Let's be very clear about this. So when I speak, when I bring things to the attention of the Dominican public, it's because I genuinely believe that they need to be aware of it. I genuinely believe that they need to be made aware of what is going on. And the way I see it today as I speak to you is that the very stability of the financial sector in Dominica is at risk. What do I mean by this? What do I mean by the stability? We need a stable financial system, because a stable financial system guarantees that you as a depositor, when you put your money in the bank, your hard-earned money is put in savings in the bank. You expect that when you want this money, it will be there for you. You expect that you can withdraw at any time, and that is what these banks are based on. It's based upon the system of trust. I deliberately give my money to the bank with the expectation that when I'm ready for it, I can access it. But if the system does not work, if the system is compromised, that very ability to access your resources could be compromised. Now, mark you, I'm not saying that's the case just yet, but I'm saying that this is a warning flag. And in my research as an academic, that is one of the things that I have found. The confidence in the banking system as one of the warning flags. So we have a shrinking economy. We have a shrinking financial system, but there is also risk to the stability of that system. And why is that the case? It is unconfirmed, and I can tell you straight up, I do not have the information. It is just rumor. But we've heard from time to time that the banks like Royal Bank of Canada, obviously headquartered in Canada, Scotia Bank headquartered in Canada, Barclays Bank headquartered in Britain, part of the reason why they left Dominica, in addition to questions of profitability and the issues that I raised earlier, has to do with the possibility that the US regulators are applying pressure on those banks to know their customers in an environment of potential financial fraud and money laundering. So the banks have to make a calculation. I remember in one case, as I researched this particular topic, the Bank of America, they were threatened a fee. They were threatened, if you like, a charge. It's a fee that the feds would place on them in a particular case of $3.2 billion having to do with a particular money laundering incident in one of the Caribbean countries. Now, the consideration of those banks is that why take the risk? Why take the risk for a country where you're barely making profits. And people say, oh, well, all these years the banks exploited us, the monies were going on. But that's not, in the scheme of things, the size of Dominica in the global financial system is minuscule. So Scotiabank or Barclays Bank does not rise or fall on what is going on. The monies that they get in a whole year in Dominica, they make in a couple of hours in other countries. Okay, so that idea, that notion that this bank, oh, it's good that they're gone because they were just exploiting us is ridiculous. Okay, what they did, what they offered was stability. What they offered was putting some real, really helping us in the banking system. The fact that they're now gone is a cause of concern. And the question is it linked to money laundering in Dominica? Is it linked to financial crimes? Are these banks simply deciding it is not worth the risk? Is that what the decision is? Now, if that is the case, and let's dwell on that for a few minutes. If the case is that those banks which have left, like Royal Bank and Scotiabank, if it is the case that they've left because of the pressure put on them by US regulators, then we have a serious problem, because it would mean that the two remaining banks will ultimately have the same problem. So what can we expect? What can we expect? What I would like to see happen is that the government of Dominica behaves, particularly in the current situation where we have really two banks in Dominica, where we will have two banks, is that the government of Dominica behaves in a more responsible manner. Respect the parliamentary limit on overdrafts. It has been put there for a reason. And also do not use the National Bank, because you're the majority shareholder, as your piggy bank. Because your behavior could very well jeopardize thousands and thousands of Dominicans who hold deposits at those banks. Hundreds of additional Dominicans who are going to come to the National Bank by January 31st, when First Caribbean Bank shuts down. So I'd like to see the government behaving in a more, in a better manner, in a more prudent manner. I would like to see in particular the Minister of Finance exercise more control in the handling of the resources of the country. All right, we had a small break, but I wanted to continue. It's because there is a question of the behavior of the government, not only impacting the banking system in Dominica, but I'll tell you where my head is and where my thinking is, based again on my experience. I'm not saying this thing lightly. I'm saying this, I was writing about currency issues, financial market issues, way back in 2000, in the 1990s. So I have not come to this thing lately. Something that I have studied, that I understand properly as well as any expert in the world. My concern is, and that's very important, that not only does that threaten the stability of our financial system in Dominica, but it could have implications for the stability of the East Caribbean dollar. You understand? Because again, since 1974, the EC dollar has been pegged at $1 to 2.7 East Caribbean dollars. That has been stable over all of those years, over 50 years, close to 50 years. My concern is that because of the situation we now find ourselves, if the government continues to behave in such a reckless manner as to be literally raiding the bank as if it were its piggy bank, that could have implications for the rest of the Eastern Caribbean countries. It could have implications for Antigua, for St. Kitts, for Montserrat, for Anguilla, for Grenada, for St. Vincent, for St. Lucia. So it's not just about Dominica. And I would really like to engage, those of you that think that, hey, I'm just doing this because I'm being political and so, no, I'm not. This is a very sober warning. Literally, it would be almost like professional suicide for me, or professional negligence. That's what I'm looking for. Professional negligence for me not to draw your attention to this very important development within our banking sector. Now I'm trying to follow through as I comment, and there was a question as well about the credit union. In fact, one of the comments that I got when I wrote the article, someone says, oh, well, you did not go into the pros and cons of consolidation. You did not talk about the credit union. What I said about the credit union is that a few years ago, the credit union movement, which in fact had provided a very robust support to the financial sector in our smaller depositors, in the rural communities, it was very convenient. For example, if you're a farmer, right, and you've just picked up your pay packet from the boxing plant, or you've just picked up your pay packet, it made sense. You could just go across to your credit union in your village and deposit your earnings. So you had a number of credit unions coming up all over Dominica, which was a good thing. It showed a buoyancy, it showed a robustness, it showed that things were happening not only in Roseau, but in the rural community. People were earning incomes. They had savings that they could save in the credit unions. But a few years ago, the credit unions, they were actually forced to consolidate. In other words, they came together, a number of credit unions, they put together their assets and so on, so that they were bigger, they could better withstand the impact of lower deposits, because the rural economy in Dominica has almost completely vanished under this Labour Party government. It's gone. So people in the rural communities hardly have any incomes to invest in the credit unions. So the credit union and Grand Fund River Circuit now have to rely on deposits coming from people in Roseau, maybe working in Roseau, that kind of thing. So you had that situation where they had to consolidate. And it's a good thing that they did. And it has worked out well. So I applaud the vision of those persons in credit union who saw the need to consolidate. Because if that was not done, if they had not consolidated, at that time, we'd have been talking about a very different situation in Dominica with regards to the credit union. So they're still there. But in addition to the issue that I talked about of basically a shrinking economy, the threat of money laundering, and the threat that pays for us, we still have more issues within the banking sector. In that, how do two banks operate? How do they continue to lend to the Dominican public? How do they continue to fuel economic activity? These are all the concerns that I wanted to share with you, and to hope that that you all take the article in the spirit with which it was intended. It was not political. It was only to raise the alarm. Okay, because this is not consolidation. Consolidation is when the banks, number of banks, get bigger in the process. What we have is a shrinking financial sector in Dominica. It is shrinking because the economy is shrinking. It is shrinking because the rural economy in Dominica has been almost completely destroyed. It is shrinking because the government, rather than create opportunities for people to work and earn a living and be able to face the bank on their own, they're being built apartments to live in. So the banks, that's another business that the bank loses out on. So as much as this is well intended, it also has the consequence of undermining the very banking system that we need to be robust, that we need to be vibrant. All right, so I hope this made sense to all of you. I think I'm going to have a lot more to say on this in the days ahead. But I want to thank you for watching this video. I wanted to share it as well. All right, let us have a conversation and stop this nonsense of accusing people of wrong motives. What I'm saying, in my article, one person that I interacted with, I said, is there anything factually incorrect in the article I wrote? Is there anything factually incorrect? If there is, I'll be the first to admit it and correct it. Okay? Is anything factually incorrect? Not because we support different sides in the political fray in Dominica that you should disregard what I'm saying. Because at the end of the day, I'm sure we all have deposits in the bank. We all like to stand in line. I was in Dominica a few days ago. I would be going into town at about 7:30, and already the lines were stretching outside of the National Bank. So that tells me that there were countless average Dominicans who have their life savings with those banks in Dominica. So we have to do everything to safeguard those banks. We have to do everything to safeguard the financial sector. Because if we don't, those who will take the heat are those people that I see standing outside of the National Bank every single day, waiting to go in, waiting to be the first in line when the bank opens at 8 o'clock to withdraw, whether it's $100 or whatever it is, to go about the daily business. So this should not be taken lightly. I think this is a serious enough situation to raise the alarm. I don't want anybody to be panicked. I'm not saying that the financial system is going to collapse tomorrow. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are warning signs. And given my study, given my expertise in early warning systems when it comes to the financial system, I thought it was important to put this out there, to caution, to warn, and most importantly, to encourage good behavior. Because I believe that the National Bank can be guaranteed a long and fruitful life in Dominica if the government of Dominica behaves respectfully with regards to the bank. If the government of Dominica do not raid the bank, if the government of Dominica do not take those high levels of overdrafts, in 1 year, $134 million, over $250 million in 2 years. That's a lot if you compare it. And the last thing I will say as I close is to talk about the non-performing loans in the banking sector. That's another thing that could cripple the banking sector. You have a number of persons increasingly unable to meet their commitments to the banks. So you have a high level of non-performing loans, which will obviously have a greater impact on the banks. The banks are not able to retrieve what they lent in the past. They now have to provision. And in fact, you might take this lightly, but the East Caribbean Central Bank, which is the authority that regulates and administers and monitors the banking system in the Caribbean islands, in East Caribbean islands, the East Caribbean Central Bank had something to say about us. In that they told, and if you can find that in the last IMF report, Article 4 report of last year, the East Caribbean Central Bank told the banks in Dominica, in particular National Bank, that they need to provision up to 100% for the non-performing loans. What does that mean? Let me just give you a very quick example to explain this. Let's assume there is a loan portfolio. Let's assume the National Bank. To make it very easy and very simple, let's assume, but you can change it to any number you want. Let's assume that the National Bank gives out $10,000 in loans, all right? $10,000 in loans. Then from that $10,000 in loans, let's assume that 6,000 are good, that they're being repaid and so on. But 4,000 out of this 10,000, they're bad loans. In other words, people are not able to pay. They've either lost their jobs or their incomes are not sufficient for them to pay. They are late and so on. So they're called non-performing loans because they're not able to repay them. So 4,000. What the bank has been doing in the past, from this 4,000, it is supposed to what we call provision. In other words, make allowance for that 4,000 in case they never get those loans. So every year, from that 4,000, they would probably apportion, say, 1,000, let's say 25%, right? $1,000. So they put aside $1,000, which means they cannot touch that 1,000. That is money, otherwise that could be used for lending. They cannot do that. That has to go as a provision against these bad loans, 1,000. But now, the East Caribbean Central Bank is telling the National Bank that they need to provision up to 100% in a couple of years' time. What that means? It means effectively that they have to find an additional $3,000 to cover the entire 4,000. So they have to provision up to 100% of the non-performing loans. So you can see the implications for that. So you've moved from 25% now to 100%. That is $3,000 less that you now have to lend. $3,000 that you have less to play with in the banking system. All right? So that is the implication for the high level of non-performing loans that we have. But worse, that burden, whereas it was shared among 6 banks, is now going to be shared among 2 banks in Dominica. Right? So you see the potential that this has. You can see the potential that this has for all of us in Dominica. And I say all of us because I know even if you live overseas, like me, I'm sure you have interest in Dominica, you have interest in the banking system, you save your money there, and you want to be sure that whatever happens, that you have access to your money. All right, so in conclusion, government, you need to act more responsibly. Stop taking these large levels of overdrafts in the system. And secondly, with regards to the behavior, this money laundering behavior, this needs to be more thoroughly investigated, and that is the role of the FIU, the financial unit there. Need to investigate this more so that we protect the integrity of the banking system. And finally, which is of concern, so you might say, okay, well, I don't have any savings in Dominica. My family is okay. They don't have money to save, so they don't save. Blah, blah. I use MoneyGram and Western Union to send money to Dominica. But you know, when the financial system, that's why I talk about the stability. If there is a question about the stability of the financial system, it could, and I stress could, I'm not saying it is or it will, it could impact Western Union and MoneyGram. So there could come a day when your ability to support your family through these institutions could very well be in jeopardy. Right? So for all of these reasons and more, let's take this warning seriously. Let's throw out the politics. I know it's very tempting for us in Dominica to insert politics in every discussion, but let's take this with the seriousness that it deserves. And that is, as Dominicans, for us to think very clearly about our financial system, which is the basis for what we enjoy with our fixed exchange rate, what we enjoy with the rest of the Caribbean islands. And let us behave like a good brother, a good neighbor within the Caribbean. Let's not be out there on our own, behaving in an irresponsible manner. All right, so let me at that point just thank all of you for your comments. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this early in the morning, most likely where you are. Thank you for giving me the time and also for speaking for these things. And I would like to also encourage a discussion. Very often in Dominica we don't discuss issues. We have a MIPWE approach to everything. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to have a different view. I am open, I'm fine if people disagree with what I say. It's okay. But let's do this in an impassioned manner because it ultimately is going to impact all of us. It will. There's no two ways about it. It will. When our ability to transact is impacted, or if that ability is impacted, or ability to transfer monies is impacted, that means the well-being of our families in Dominica is going to be impacted. So it has a potential to impact all of us. So let us take this seriously, again, with the spirit that it was intended, and that is to simply bring some light on this important, very important issue of the shrinking side. And if you've not already done so, I would encourage you to read the article. It's available on the Dominican.net, or you can just do a search, Alarm over the shrinking size of banks in Dominica, and you will find this article. So let me thank you. Have a good day wherever you are. And thank you so much for listening. What I will do is, when the program has ended, I will go through your comments and questions, and if there are specific questions to respond to, I will do so. All right, but let me thank all of you for taking the time to listen to me and taking the time to participate in this very critical and important discussion that concerns all of us here in Dominica. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye. All right. Okay, I think somebody wanted to come in. Can you do this again? All right, the official thing is over. Actually, we can probably just interact a little bit. If there's anybody who wants to ask a question or something, probably we can do it now. All right, the official bit is over, but we have some time if you just want to engage. I saw somebody was trying to engage via video. So if you want to do that, then I can spend a few minutes. If there's a question that you have specifically, you can put it out there. And if you want to engage me one-on-one, I think now is the time to do this. So I'll just give you a few minutes to do so. All right. There is somebody wanting to bring the video. All right. Now, I'm not sure how this works, but if you want to come on and you want to ask a question, I'll just allow a few more minutes for that. Any concern, anything that I said that you want clarified, I'll be happy to do it. But I think it's important for us, as I said, to be discussing these issues and not to be fighting over it, just discussing it. It is critically important for us to do so. All right. Okay. I guess, as I said, what I'll do then, I will just go through your comments and try to respond to any question that you may have. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, let's see this. Prove this. One person, I think I finally was able to figure this thing out. So, all right, let's just give him a few minutes now to come on. I think he had some issue that he wanted to raise. All right. I'm not sure how long I've never really done this before, so I'm not sure how long it's going to take in terms of connecting. I think I did what I was supposed to do. It says it is adding. I'm not sure how long it's going to take. All right. All right. I think it's probably just not going to happen for us today in terms of getting the inputs. Could be my bandwidth there is a bit limited. All right. There we have a question. All right. The question is, why do you believe that the international banks are moving out of Dominica? All right. I tried to address that in the discussion, but I think there are two reasons for it. Really, two major reasons. The number one reason is a declining level of profitability. These banks are realizing a higher level of non-performing loans and reduced profitability. So that's the number one issue. And the reduced profitability is linked to the shrinking economy in Dominica. The Dominican economy is getting smaller and smaller. It is shrinking. Less people are working. Real incomes are going down. So that is the number one issue. The second issue, we believe, has to do with the money laundering risk. It has to do with the money laundering risk that we see in the islands. Okay, there is a belief that the Caribbean is a haven for money laundering, and the banks simply do not want to have to face these high fines. The feds have shown a willingness to impose really high fines on banks that, whether they know it or not, enable money laundering. And I believe that the banks are not prepared to take that risk. So these are the two major reasons why we see international banks leaving. And in fact, they will all be gone. These are banks, by the way, that has been there, that has been gone for that's been there for a very long time. I mean, the Barclays Bank, older than I am. I grew up knowing Barclays Bank as a kid. There are two questions. One question is on why do you believe present-day Dominicans do not take their personal finances, let's see if we can get this clearer, do not take their personal finances seriously. Why do they believe the government can do what they want to the citizens? I find this baffling, to say the least. Like you, I also find this baffling that people don't take this seriously. I guess because they don't understand the critical importance. They don't understand how critical it is that there could come a day when you no longer have access to your money. Okay, that could happen. And if you no longer have access to your money, it's a serious thing. The other question has to do with how do you, in terms of goods and services, how do access to the banks impact the goods and services? Now, you need the banking sector for importation, particularly everything we consume in Dominica, from the clothes we wear to the food we eat. Particularly everything we consume in Dominica comes from overseas, right? And because of that, you need the bank. The banks are the ones that facilitate these imports, okay? So for example, if I want to, as a trader in Dominica, if I want to import goods from the United States, I have to go to a bank in Dominica, give them my EC dollars. The bank then converts that EC dollars to US dollars and send this money to my supplier in the United States. So that's also, you need the banks to basically accommodate this trade. When the supplier in the US receives this money, it will then send the goods to me. So now you have access to these goods. If, God forbid, you no longer have those banks operating in that capacity, then it means that the supplier, the business in Dominica now become unable to pay for their goods overseas. And that's going to restrict the amount of goods coming into Dominica, right? So it has a real potential to impact the amount of goods or the access for goods and services in Dominica, right? So that's a very important point that the individual raised. And like I said, I think the issue of Dominica is not taking it seriously really has to do with just the lack of understanding of the way the banking system works. The banks have been there all our lives. We believe they will be there all our lives, right? So you just don't, that's not something you consciously think about. Okay, and so I think it's left to us professionals in this area to actually raise the alarm when we think that there is a potential for things going south. And that's exactly what I've been trying to do, exactly what I've tried to do in this particular live feed this morning. Coming to you live from Juba, South Sudan, by the way. So yeah, so I think it's important, and a very important topic of discussion. Like I said, it's one that should concern all of us, and it's one that we should not relent on discussing. Let's discuss it. Let's discuss it. All right, so from what I understand, FCIB may have the largest savings deposits, many from the diaspora, especially Dominicans reside in, and that's probably true, all right? It's probably from Dominicans residing in, because for years and years and years, Dominicans who went to the United Kingdom, for example, we had a first wave, a major wave of migration in the 1960s. To the United Kingdom. A number of persons who migrated to the United Kingdom then would have opened savings account in Barclays Bank. Remember, FCIB was once Barclays Bank, right? So those savings remain. So you have people who have been saving for years and years, probably have hundreds of thousands of dollars there in those that they built up over many years. So I would think that is true, that probably a very large number of depositors would have come from the United Kingdom. Now the question is access, right? And interesting enough, I was talking to a depositor in Dominica whose parents are in the United Kingdom and who now has the dilemma of transferring, because basically you have to get your money out. Okay, you need to get your money out of the First Caribbean Bank, and it's saying time to look for other places to put it. This individual was telling me that he actually has to go back physically to Dominica to do it. So there is a cost involved there. He has to go back physically to Dominica. For those who have already set up the banking, because the First Caribbean Bank had a really easy and good interface that you could do your banking online. Those of you who have this access to the banking, it's very simple to go on there and then set up the transfer of your deposits. So whatever deposits you have, you can go up there. You can go on First Caribbean system, on the online system. You can go on the transfers and set up your account or somebody else's account in another bank in Dominica and do that seamlessly. If you do not have access to the online banking, and this person was trying to get access, and unfortunately it appears as if the bank is probably not entertaining or it's not providing it easily now, you may have to actually make a trip to Dominica to do that physical transfer. Okay, but I think the option for transfer via online is still there, and people should make use of it. As I said, the choices you have: credit union, National Bank, or the Republic Bank. Okay, so you decide which of those banks is probably best for you, but you need to get it done and done within these 5 months that is left. Yeah. All right, so again, special thanks to all of you for joining on this impromptu live session. I will go through, as I said, I promise this afternoon, I will go through the questions that are raised, which probably I wasn't able to see, and because it was moving very quickly, and try my best to respond to your questions. But above all, let me thank you for listening and thank you for your interest in this topic, which I believe is one of public interest. Thanks to all of you. Have a great day. Okay, bye-bye.